Diversity has become the sovereign social and political ideal of our age. It is now the public ideology of Western civilization's most powerful institutions. According to Ellen Berry, the word itself wears a halo. Within this dominion, the gay rights rainbow is to be conceived of as perfectly representative of the enforced diversity of Western nations, races, languages, and religious sects. Indeed, it was first popularized politically by American Methodist minister J.W. Van Kirk following the First World War, when he incorporated it into his flag for a future world federation. How fitting, then, that the rainbow flag is presently found fluttering above the public squares of our cities as the dawn of a brave new world begins to stir. A recent sociological study entitled From Tolerance to Equality by Darrell E. Paul argues with authoritative scientific evidence for the economic incentive behind the corporate and oligarchic promotion of gay rights in the present age. The regnant ideology of our time ensures Paul's examination of the immediate Kulturkampf must be approached carefully and from an ostensibly neutral position. As an empirical study, the book is data-heavy and replete with a sociological vernacular, and from a superfluity of pages on testable constructions, such as multiple correspondence analyses, it convincingly attests to the correlation between wealth, social and cultural capital, and support for gay marriage. Paul's assertion is that the American liberal elite uses opinions on homosexuality as a mark of social distinction, and thus as a tool for accumulating cultural authority and political power, inferring that they also expand their economic potential via this acquisition. Notre Dame professor Patrick Deneen writes how Paul's study raises unavoidable and even uncomfortable connections between the entrenchment of class inequality and elite-driven advances of sexual equality in today's America, writing that powerful adherents of the postmodern utopia are committed to displacing traditional arrangements of family, marriage, and child-rearing in favor of individual autonomy, self-creation, and lifestyle choices shorn of long-standing commitment. World-straddling corporations have a strong interest in fostering atomized, denormalized subjects, and because their fluid identities arise primarily from appetites that can be altered through both marketing and technology, they are ideal consumers. The ideological justification for this economic project has been long prepared by the intellectual class, which, over the last 4 decades, has devoted itself to the displacing of traditional social norms in favor of theories of self-devotion in a world governed not by custom or natural law, but solely in accordance with self-centered will and its manipulation. Furthermore, this social engineering scheme will increasingly become an all-out attack on traditional Western fatherhood, which it will attempt to anonymize, then eventually replace altogether. But let us dispense with platitudes. When the state includes same-sex couples in the institution of marriage, it confers public approval on same-sex activity. So why did it come about that universities, the highly educated, judges, Hollywood, and the media were in the vanguard for the advancement of homosexual normalization? And why has it been framed as a matter of civil rights and equality? Setting the cultural Marxist intelligentsia and its institutional establishment aside, the early endorsement by big business of gay rights seems downright puzzling. Corporate marketing that interacts with a wide general public is supposedly sensitive to public opinion. Yet in this case, corporate support came long before the public's. However, a very small, revolutionary vanguard of people with immense capital wealth got the ball rolling. So how did a supposedly left-wing movement then become the religion of a rich and powerful social orthodoxy? Throughout history, cultural elites have desired unfettered liberty and wealth, so it isn't difficult to see the connection between this essential selfishness with support for whatever maximizes their political control. And no group with mobile wealth spends more on luxuries or identifies more strongly with the global monoculture than childless couples, particularly homosexual couples who simply do not waste time and resources on reproduction and child-rearing. Once that most persistent of restrictions on appetite and profit, the natural law, disintegrates, the road to ever greater class power is opened. Thus elites encourage the stimulation of the human appetite, material and otherwise, because it fuels the accumulation of wealth and power in godless societies such as our own. Today, San Francisco Pride is sponsored by Fortune 500 giants like Coca-Cola, Google, Nike, the Bank of America, and Apple. Nearly half of all Fortune 500 businesses espouse a public commitment to the LGBT community through marketing and dedicated sponsorship. The virtue-signaling fetishism of millennials taking part in civil rights movements helps account for the crowds of indoctrinated, privileged youth that gather each summer to celebrate and idolize queer sex in the public spaces of the Western world. And the trumpeting of homosexuality for this new generation carries with it a viral mixture of prestige and altruism. Municipal politicians have also been at the very forefront of the homosexual revolution. Urban development advisors like Richard Florida have spent many decades encouraging city mayors and politicians to nurture so-called gayborhoods. Gays are presented as the pioneers of gentrification and successful urban regeneration. Promoters are quick to point out that neighborhoods with larger concentrations of gays enjoy income growth and higher numbers of creative startups. Paul points out that the business elite, while anxious about living in ethnically diverse neighborhoods, have no encumbrances living amongst gays. Gayborhoods are also associated with attracting talent and hungry white millennials willing to embrace spiritually barren lives, childlessness, and low-wage service jobs. Yet John Milbank goes further by declaring gay marriage as a strategic move in the modern Western states' drive to assume direct control over the reproduction of the population, bypassing our natural interpersonal encounters. This is not about justice, but rather the desire of its biopolitical tyranny to destroy marriage and the family as the most fundamental mediating social institution. Moreover, this carries the core premise of the equalist, leveling principle within its philosophy, legally sanctioned equality that demands public affirmation and policing by the state, restricts value judgments to the narrowest range possible, and this is the final conquest of public space. Corporate America and the liberal socialist cultural elite have formed a symbiotic alliance. Their synergy between genocide and usury is effervescent. In Paul's conclusion, he astutely writes, "The sexual revolution is not the least bit metaphorical. It is as much a revolution as were the American or French revolutions in their own times. Its current frontier is transgenderism, and victory here will constitute the end of biological sex as we know it in the West." Interestingly, we are fast approaching the moment when the revolution begins to eat its own children. The fissures between liberal revolutionary forces are ever growing, and the colors of the rainbow flag are separating. For Paul, this radical challenge to all external forms of authority is also symptomatic of a larger crisis of the cultural elite's control. Confidence in Western institutions, the state, universities, mainstream media, and big business is at record lows, which should be a welcome shift in the narrative. But, however, the oligarchs still control the law and a police state wholly dependent on it, and anyone who transgresses their religious proclamations will feel the might of these for decades to come. As the liberal legal scholar Douglas Laycock ominously wrote, "If you stand in the way of revolution and lose, there will be consequences."